Okay, guys, so the next thing we're going to do in this video is add the player to the game. So we're going to start that by saying, okay, well, the player is going to be a sprite, right? It's a movable picture on the screen. So how about we do private sprite player is equal to new sprite. And that sprite's going to be based on a new image, which is file images Audi .png, I think it is. Let me just check that. Yeah, Audi.png. That's the player. Okay. And I want to add the player to our group that displays the game screen. I want the background display to be down first, and then I want the player to come after that so that the background is not over top of the player like we had the problem last time. So the background display is first, and then I'm going to add the player. And if I do that, no comma there, that should add a sprite to my screen. Let's just quick check. Right, there's the player, but of course that's not the right position. I want the player to start in the middle near the bottom of the screen. So on a new game, I'm going to set up where I want the player to be every time a new game starts. So I'm going to go player, set position, and I want them to be in the middle of the screen. So that's going to be game width divided by 2 minus player get width also divided by 2. So that'll put them in the middle of the screen. And I want them to be near the bottom. So that'd be game height minus, I'm going to do 2 times the player's height. So there'll be the player plus a little bit of space. Player.get height. All right. So now if I run that, actually before I run that, I also don't want them to start with any velocity. So because I don't want them to be moving. So I'll set the velocity to be 0 and 0. That should put the player where I want to see them to start the game. There they are down at the bottom of the screen. All right, so now what about moving the player? So when I update the game, one thing I did was update the background to keep it moving. And you can see I have another method, update player, because that's what I want to check if the keyboard keys are down and move the player if they are. So I'm going to go with update player, given an elapsed amount of time. And what I'd really like to do here is I'd like to say, well, if keyboard contains, and it's key code, I'm going to use the left and right arrows, so key code left. If it contains key code left, then because this is a driving game with the scenario, I'd love to say player.drive left. And we'll tell the player how much time has gone by for how far they should drive left. Okay, that's a bit of an error. First error because I spelled elapsed time wrong. So elapsed time spelled right, but drive left, that's a bit of an error. Just ignore that for a sec. What about if I'm pressing the right key? So contains, the keyboard contains key code right. Then what I'd really love to do, or love to write, would be, because it would make so much sense, right? If I could just write drive to the right, the elapsed time. Except drive left and drive right are not methods of the sprite class. And that's why that's an error. If I mouse over top of it, it's going to tell me create method in type sprite. Well, I don't want there to be a drive left and drive right for every kind of sprite. I just want there to be a drive left and drive right for my player sprite. So I'm actually going to create a new class here, which is going to be based off of the sprite. I want it to sort of be a sprite. Oh, I forgot a semicolon on that line too. I want it to be a sprite, but I want it to be a sprite with some extra abilities. And so in object-oriented programming, we call that inheritance. I want to create a new class that inherits everything that a sprite does and then adds on to it. Now, we've been doing that since time, right? We have always created a class that extends application and adds on to the abilities of the JavaFX application class. Well, now we're going to extend our own class. We wrote the class Sprite, but that doesn't mean we want to stop there. I want to make a new class. So I'm going new class, and I want to call this one, I'm going to call the class driver because it's the driver in the game, right? And I want the super class on this to be our class Sprite. Now you don't actually technically need to write that right here, but I'm going to write it in just so that when I create this, it'll put some of the code for me. And I'm going to check off that I want the constructors from the superclass because I want to have a constructor that kind of matches how sprites are created. So if I hit finish, we're going to see our new class here. Now, Sprite can have a constructor with no arguments to it. And so driver should be able to have a constructor with no arguments to it. And Sprite can have a constructor with one argument. What's the picture you want to be displayed? And so driver should have a constructor with one argument. What's the picture you want to be displayed? Notice how here it says we're going to do super with that image. What that's doing is it's calling the constructor from the Sprite class and passing it the image, just like you would do, in the normal game. But it's giving me the ability to do it for this new class, the driver class. And anything else that I want to do to set up a driver class, I could do here in my constructor methods. Okay, so what are some things that I want the driver class to be able to do? Well, I want the driver class, along with everything sprites can do, it already gets all that for free. But along with those things, I would like public void drive left. Just going to take the double how much time has passed. And I would also like a public void drive right, which is also going to take a double how much time has passed. And well, what do I want the car to do when it drives left? And what do I want the car to do when it drives right? So when the car drives left, I would like to set the speed in the X direction to be a certain speed. How fast do I want it to be? We'll try out some numbers and see what feels good. So I'm going to say super. Remember, that's go look back at the Sprite class and see what's available there. And so I have set velocity in the X direction. That's a method from the Sprite class. And so I can use it here in my driver class because driver extends Sprite. I want to set the velocity to, I don't know, let's say 250 pixels a second. I want this game to be a little bit faster than the soccer keep up. So I'm going to use a good size number there. 250 pixels per second seems right. But of course, if I want them driving to the left, it better be minus 250 pixels. And I'm going to say super dot update because we already had a method in the Sprite class update that takes an argument, how much time has passed, and moves the sprite by doing that. And then I'm going to set the velocity back to 0 so that after driving left a little bit, the car doesn't, for some reason, keep moving. Right, and I'm going to do the same thing for drive right, except that I want it to be 250 pixels in the positive direction, positive X direction. Okay, so now if I save that, I have this new class driver that is everything a sprite is, plus it includes drive left and drive right as new methods. If I go back and look at my crazy highway now, I can't declare the player as a sprite. I want the player to be declared as a driver. And it's created as a new driver based off the Audi image because we can do that from that constructor. And I can still add the player into my game screen because it's a sprite, which is based off a group, and I can add a group onto the screen to see the images and everything like that. But now if I go down and I get to the point where, remember, this was an error, right? If keyboard contains key code left, then the player should drive left. Well, when it was a sprite doesn't have drive left. But now that it's a driver, it does have drive left. So this is no longer an error. I should actually be able to drive to the left. So if I get that running, I press space to go into the play mode. So everything's animated. I press the left key, it drives left. I press the right key, it drives right. But I have a little bit of a problem. I don't really want the car to be able to go off the road. And if I kept holding it, I don't want it to go off the screen either. So I want to just add one little condition within that method that says if you go too far, stop, turn around, come, and don't go any further. So um, the way that I can do that, I kind of measured ahead of time, and I found that on the left side, I don't want the car to go past the 80 pixel point. So I'm going to say if get position X, oh, that's a method from the sprite class. Now it underlines it here. It's not a method from the driver class. Oh, sorry, it's underlining because I haven't finished my condition. If my get position is less than 80, right, and I can access get position method from the sprite class because I'm extending sprite. So I can use any method from the sprite class. I can write super in front of it to say like I want the one from the sprite class specifically, or I could just say get position. Now, if I make a new version of get position in this class, then it will use the new version unless I say like I specifically want the one from sprite. For this method, it doesn't really matter. In fact, for all these methods, it doesn't really matter. So I can just do that. All right, so if the position gets to be less than 80, then I don't want that. So if that's true, then I will go set position X to be 80. All right, so if you move past 80 a little tiny bit, so like down to 76, a couple pixels to the left of where you should be, then it'll just automatically put you back. The effect will be it stops the car from driving too far to the side. And the same thing on the other side. If the position of the car, so get position, plus the width of the car, because we got to measure on the right side of it, so plus get width, is greater than, and I got to remember, I want 80 pixels less than the game width. So the game width is 450. Take 80 off of that, that'd be 370. If you go over 370, then that's too far to the right. And we'll do set position X, I missed my X here, is 370. Right? Oh, get position plus get width is greater than 370, then I want your position to be 370 minus the width of the car, minus get width. Otherwise, you're going to be like having the car right over on the left-hand side of the screen, or the right-hand side of the screen. All right, now let's try that out and see if the car stops at the edges the way that it's supposed to. So I run this, press space to get going, and that's it. That's as I'm still holding left down. I can't drive any further to the left, so I can't go off the road. And on the other side, I can't go off the road to the right anymore. Right, there we go. Driver done.